My manager slammed a file on my desk and said, "Document everything." Her voice clipped, like a metronome for control. I felt the sting of it, the way she looked at me, like I was invisible until useful. "If anything goes wrong, I need a record," she added, not even pretending to be kind. I nodded because that's what I did. Nod. Take notes. Swallow the knot in my throat. My hand trembled as I opened my notebook and wrote the date, the time, her exact words. Then I wrote the tremor in my voice and the way her eyes flashed when she mentioned audits and layoffs. It was a tiny protest, a small seed of defiance under fluorescent lights. 2 hours later, as I dug through the shared drive for a benign invoice, I found a folder mislabeled with a client's name. A file inside had bank transfers, hush money amounts, and a list of vendors who didn't exist. My breath hitched. The same manager who told me to document everything had buried transfers that matched the numbers in our last quarterly shortfall. My chest tightened. I had obeyed her. I had paper and timestamps. I had proof. Then she walked in, smiled, and asked for the monthly report. I kept the file closed and my voice steady. I had documented everything, including her crimes. I sat frozen for a beat too long. The fluorescent lights hummed like a warning. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The cursor blinked like a heart stuttering. I told myself to breathe and to think like I had to survive this job. The office smelled faintly of stale coffee and toner. Outside the glass wall, construction cranes picked at the sky. Inside, the manager called the team to a sudden meeting. She praised my work, her hand brushing my shoulder with false warmth. I felt the heat of it and stayed cold. My palms sweated as I replayed the file in my head, matching dates to pay stubs to the manager's calendar. Each entry lined up too neatly. I'd always liked lists. They made chaos make sense. Now the list made chaos a crime. She talked about trust and loyalty. The room drank her words. I looked at my notebook, where every instruction had its timestamp, and at the labeled folder hidden under invoices. How do you confront someone whose entire game is gaslight and charm? I had the receipts, but I had a life dependent on a paycheck and a reference. The stakes rose like a tide. I needed a plan. But first, I needed to collect more. At my desk that afternoon, I pretended to log expenses while copying files to a secure external drive. My hands moved carefully, practiced, like a surgeon with steady focus. I made duplicates, encrypted them with a password only I would remember. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every click felt loud. When the manager passed by, she asked about the copier. I smiled and said it was fine. She eyed my screen and laughed softly. "You're so meticulous, Lawrence. Keep it up." The laugh scraped me. I saved the folder under a false name, then hid the drive in a hollowed-out book in my bag. I rehearsed my defense. I was following orders, documenting everything. The files were incriminating: transfers to offshore accounts, invoices with fake vendors, an email admitting the adjustments were to cover personal debts. A single line tied a shell company to her sister. I pictured journalists, anonymous tips, a police badge knocking on our glass doors. But fear is persuasive. I had a mother who needed medicine, a small, cheap apartment lease, and friends I owed favors. Still, the ledger pulsed in my mind like a lit fuse. I needed allies, people outside her orbit. But whom could I trust in a place where smiles masked teeth? I remembered an old friend from college, Amir, who'd become a freelance IT specialist. He wasn't the heroic type, but he loved puzzles and hated injustice. I reached out, careful, using my personal phone, not the office line. His reply was quick and cautious. "Meet for coffee. Bring nothing incriminating." We met in a corner cafe, the kind with poor Wi-Fi and strong espresso. I slid the external drive across the table like contraband. His expression hardened as he skimmed files, then brightened with the gleam of someone who'd found a rare piece for his collection. "This is clean," he said. "Metadata is intact. No tampering." Relief tasted like metal. He explained I'd done the right thing encrypting the copy, and he offered to create an off-site backup and set up anonymous cloud storage. He also warned about surveillance. Managers who embezzle often watch access logs and cameras. I admitted my fear that she'd notice me digging. He asked for names, dates, the exact phrase she used. When I said, "Document everything," Amir's face went pale. She gave the instruction. "That helps you, But it also makes this messy, eh? He said. We laid out options. Anonymous tip to regulators, go to HR, or leak to a journalist. Each route had consequences. The room felt smaller, the air felt colder. He closed his laptop slowly. Whatever you do, don't do it alone. Back at the office, I felt exposed, as if the fluorescent lights could somehow probe my secrets. The manager watched me more closely now, her smile flickering like a faulty bulb. That evening, she asked to speak privately. My heart lurched. Her office smelled of expensive perfume and winter mint. She closed the door with a deliberate slowness and sat like a queen measuring her subject. You look tired, she said. Is someone bothering you? My stomach dropped. I considered telling her the truth, that I had read files, that I had copies, but fear buckled my spine. Instead I lied. Just the workload, I said. She softened, leaning forward. You're reliable, Lawrence. I trust you. That's why I said document everything. Her tone threaded through me, a rope pulling my conscience. She touched my notebook resting on my lap, as if to ask permission to read it. I pulled it away. Her eyes narrowed. Then she smiled. Keep those notes. They might save you. The implication hit like a slap. She knew about documentation, about leverage. My mind raced. Has she been testing me? Or manipulating me to create a paper trail for herself? I left her office walking very slowly, the hum of the fluorescent lights now a drumbeat of warning. I had to escalate but also protect the evidence and the people who could help me expose her. That night I couldn't sleep. The files were a bright coal in my chest. I worried that any wrong move could burn me. I wrote a timeline, dates, transfers, meetings, the exact wording she used. The timeline read like a confession she never meant to write. I emailed an anonymous tip to a financial regulation agency, attaching a redacted sample and offering the encrypted backup if they requested it. My finger hovered before I hit send. Every scenario flickering through my head. They could trace it back. They might ignore it. They could be complicit. I included a line about document everything to frame the instruction as her confession. Then I sent it. Afterward, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We noticed extra login activity on the server tonight. Be careful. The message felt like a warning or a threat. I replied nothing. I felt watched. I thought of my mother, of rent, of the quiet life I'd built. I considered destroying the external drive to erase evidence of my possession. But the thought of letting her go on, of everyone else getting robbed, hardened me. I backed up the drive in 2 more places, including a safety deposit box key hidden in a sock drawer at a friend's apartment. I had her crimes in 3 physical places, and an anonymous contact in a regulator's inbox. The stakes had moved from survival to moral urgency. The next morning, the office buzzed, but beneath the chatter was a tension like a low electric hum. People whispered about audits and possible layoffs. The manager greeted everyone with a practiced calm, but I noticed tiny cracks, a hand trembling while signing, a forced laugh. I watched her like a trap watching prey. At noon, an unexpected visitor arrived, an investigator from the company's parent firm, someone in a sharp coat and a badge. He asked to see financial statements, interviewed department heads, and requested server logs. Breathe, I told myself. This could be good. The investigator's questions were precise, the kind Amir had admired. He asked me about recent unusual transfers and irregular vendor invoices. I told the truth, but omitted the copies I'd made. I kept my answers factual, careful not to volunteer anything that might incriminate me if she turned the tables. The manager sat at her desk, palms folded, offering helpful answers. Afterward, she pulled me aside and thanked me for my vigilance. Her smile was dangerous. Later, when I checked the office server logs from my workstation, I saw a spike in access from an internal admin account timed when the investigator was interviewing staff. Someone was covering tracks. I felt the room tilt. She was cleaning evidence, and the investigator might be part of the sweep or a coincidence. Either way, the net was closing. I needed to move faster. That evening, I met Amir again. He'd mirrored the server spike. Some logs had been retroactively purged. They scrubbed certain entries by running a privileged script, he explained. Whoever did it knew what to remove. My stomach sank. I asked about the investigator. He checked in through the parent firm's portal, But that doesn't prove he's clean, Amir said. He suggested we plan a breadcrumb trail, a fake transfer notice that would lead an external auditor back to the manager without alerting her to our moves. It felt like a heist movie plan, but desperation writes bold scripts. We created a dummy invoice with a traceable microtransaction routed through an account monitored by a journalist friend of Amir's. Then we set up a dummy email exchange, suggesting the manager approved it. We didn't send anything yet. It felt dangerous, and it was, but the alternative was letting her keep erasing things. If they scrub again after this, they'll trip on their own footprints, Amir said. I wrestled with the ethics of forging evidence to expose wrongdoing, but the manager had already crafted false papers to hide her crimes. I justified our small forgery as a mirror. We scheduled the drop for the next day, timing it with the investigator's next visit. My hands shook with adrenaline and fear. If we were caught, I could be the scapegoat. Still, justice demanded risk. Morning came with rain that drummed like nervous fingers on the office windows. The manager moved through the floor like a conductor, orchestrating calm. The investigator returned, clipboard in hand, and asked for the same documents. This time, we watched his movements. I sent the dummy invoice through a shadow account prepared by Amir and flagged the transaction to the journalist's monitored address. The moment the transfer hit, the journalist pinged us. Got something. Looks off. The investigator paused, checking his phone. He asked the manager about vendor approvals. She answered smoothly, then excused herself to her office, closing the door slowly, the same move she used when cleaning. The investigator's phone buzzed. He frowned and asked to see the server logs again. Before anyone could stop him, Amir, using a permission sneaked to me earlier, pulled up the audit trail for that specific microtransaction. The log showed an approval timestamp, matching the manager's login. The investigator's face darkened. He requested to speak with IT privately. The manager returned, forced to smile intact, but her eyes were alert. After the meeting, she called me into her office and accused me of snooping. She leaned in, voice low and hot. If you cross me, you'll lose everything. My heart thudded. Instead of suing, she was using fear. But the investigator would be hard to ignore now. The line had been tripped. At the same time, someone anonymously posted a screenshot of the suspicious transfer on an internal message board. The office exploded into whispers. The hunt had officially begun. Panic moved through the staff like wind through dry leaves. People gossiped, theories ballooned, and the manager clutched her composure like armor. The investigator called an all-hands meeting and said they'd freeze suspect accounts while they probed. The manager nodded as if they were doing routine work, then cast a glance at me that said both warning and calculation. After the meeting, she cornered me in the kitchen, voice low and sharp. You were the one who leaked that board, weren't you? Do you want to end your career? My pulse pounded. I denied it, though my denial felt thin. She stepped closer, and her tone softened with a promise of retribution disguised as mentorship. Remember my advice, Lawrence. Document everything. Keep your records. They might save you. The irony hit like a physical blow. She was training me to be her witness and her scapegoat at once. I kept my expression blank and collected myself. I had to act quickly. With the investigator distracted by frozen accounts, they might search backups or even my desk. I moved my hidden drives to a public locker across town, using cash to rent it. I also dropped a tip, anonymous and more detailed, to an investigative journalist at a national paper, attaching a redacted but damning file. My hand shook as I hit send. It felt like lighting a fuse and hoping it would reach the right hands before the wrong ones caught me. Late that night, I received an encrypted reply from the journalist. We want to verify before publishing. Can you meet? My chest tightened with equal parts fear and relief. A chance for a broader platform meant real exposure. I knew the manager could crush me if she traced the leak, so I insisted on an encrypted meeting through a burner. We agreed to meet at a public library where cameras and people might deter anyone from attacking us. The journalist arrived as a distracted woman with a messenger bag and lots of questions, scribbling notes like a moth to a lamp. I laid out the timeline, the transfers, the emails, and the manager's instruction to document everything. She listened and then looked strangely pleased. This is gold, she whispered. But we need more. Proof of intent, pattern, something that shows she benefited personally. I handed her the file copies, and she photographed the key documents. She promised anonymity and said her editor would need to vet archived emails and bank records, but she also warned, once this goes public, they're going to retaliate hard. Her words were a cold rain. I thought of my mother and my fragile life. The journalist suggested one more move, a controlled leak timed with a public regulatory announcement. She'd work on corroboration, and we'd try to trigger a decisive investigation. I left the library clutching a pamphlet on whistleblower protections, feeling both empowered and terrified. I had started a chain reaction, and there would be no turning back. The next morning, the manager's eyes were red-rimmed as if from sleepless nights or performative stress. She hugged the office narrative of being a victim of malicious insiders. The investigator wearing patience like armor announced a temporary reassignment of responsibilities while they examined accounts. That meant the manager moved into damage control, holding emergency meetings, personally vetting invoices like a hawk. She sought me out again, voice sugary with concern. "You look pale, Lawrence. Are you all right?" She had sharpened sympathy into a weapon. I answered coolly. Words felt inadequate. Meanwhile, the journalist requested time to cross-check shell companies and offshore accounts. I provided more files and the names I'd found connected to her sister's firm. Each revelation was another fracture in her facade. But then something unexpected happened. An anonymous tip sent to the investigator named me as the source of leaked documents and suggested I had motives, a disgruntled employee trying to sabotage the company. It hit like a thrown stone. The investigator's demeanor cooled, eyes searching mine with suspicion. I explained my actions, the anonymous tip, the hidden drives, but the damage was done. Trust is brittle. The manager watched, a predator savoring the change in wind. My credibility was slipping. I had to reinforce it, but the more I pushed, the more she had to fight back. I started to fear that evidence alone might not save me if she could spin the narrative. The office became a war zone of whispered accusations. HR scheduled a meeting to discuss conduct, and the manager suggested I attend voluntarily to clear the air. My stomach dropped. Anything could be misinterpreted. I consulted Amir and the journalist, who advised caution, record the meeting, bring a witness, and avoid making any admission without counsel. I asked a colleague Maya, no, wait, can't use that name. I asked my coworker Raul to come as an observer. He'd seen the manager's temper and owed me small favors. At HR, the manager presented an alternate version of events. She'd found an unauthorized access attempt and claimed someone tried to sabotage internal systems. The investigator listened, pen tapping. HR asked pointed questions about my conduct. Raul vouched for me, quietly saying I'd stayed late legitimately to reconcile an account. The manager's eyes flicked to Raul, calculating. HR decided to launch an internal review, temporarily placing my access privileges under suspension pending findings. My access badge hummed uselessly against the scanner. The hum felt like a lock snapping. I left HR with fewer rights and more suspicion. Outside, Raul gave me a look that mixed guilt and resolve. "We need more proof," he said. The net had tightened. I had to find a way to expose her without relying only on internal channels. With internal access limited, I turned to old habits. Paper trails, memory, people. I began to collect testimony from vendors, those who had been ghosted by payments or told to invoice through odd channels. Some were small, intimidated businesses. Others were freelancers paid in cash. I met them one by one, in parks, cafes, and after hours at their offices. They told similar stories. Regular clients diverted to new accounts, rushed approvals, sudden demands for secrecy. One vendor, a shy bookbinder named Paula, admitted she'd been pressured into issuing duplicate invoices. Her hands trembled as she described the manager's calls. Each testimony built a mosaic of methods and motives. I compiled sworn statements, notarized them quietly. I also found a discrepancy, a vacation receipt showing the manager on a trip at dates she claimed to be working late. The pattern emerged, personal enrichment hidden as corporate exigency. Armed with testimonies and physical receipts, I contacted the journalist again. She said it was enough to compel her editor to dig deeper. Meanwhile, the manager seemed to sense the widening circle. She started canceling outside meetings and keeping key people close. I felt like a hunted animal moving through a shrinking forest. Still, The evidence multiplied. If we could stitch vendor stories to financial transfers and the manager's calendar, we'd have a narrative hard to spin away. The problem was timing and my dwindling safety. The journalist sent a cryptic message. We can run this next week, but we need one more smoking gun, a direct trail from her to personal gain. My stomach clenched. I thought of the nephew's tuition she'd once lamented over a casual lunch. I dug deeper into expense reports and found a thin thread: reimbursements for client dinners that matched luxury hotels near her sister's property. The amounts were small individually but consistent. I tracked a property appraisal tied to the sister's name and cross-checked dates. Patterns lined up like constellations. The picture was ugly. I sent everything to the journalist with annotations. She replied, "This is it. We'll publish a long-form piece with documents and interviews. Hold tight." Holding tight felt like standing under a storm. The manager reacted like a cornered animal, ramping up intimidation, hinting at legal action, and whispering rumors about my mental stability. At work, my seat felt colder, as if an invisible hand had turned down the thermostat. Then, the night before the planned publication, a black sedan idled for an hour outside my building. I watched it from my window. No one left the car. My phone buzzed with an anonymous call that breathed, "Stop this, or you'll regret it." I did not answer. Fear surged, but so did resolve. I told the journalist about the threat. Her response was immediate. "We escalate to our legal team. They'll call you." The next day, a lawyer representing the paper called and advised me to secure myself physically and legally. I rented a cheap room in a different part of town and slept in shifts, never fully closing my eyes. The article dropped like thunder. Headlines screamed about embezzlement and internal fraud, listing documents, vendor testimony, and the manager's name. Social media spilled over with outrage, and within hours, the parent company issued a statement launching an independent probe. The manager's face, once composed, looked smaller in the flood of exposure. But ripples are tricky. She denied everything, blaming a smear campaign and accusing the journalist of fabricating evidence. Her loyalists rallied, painting her as a victim of corporate politics. The investigator from the parent firm sent a terse message: "We need to re-interview you." I agreed cautiously, with the journalist and Amir in earshot via encrypted chat. The investigator's questions were thorough, focused on bank trails and approvals. He requested to see my encrypted drive copies. I handed them over through the journalist's legal channel, not directly. Days later, subpoenas arrived for multiple bank records. The music of justice began to play. Then the manager retaliated in a new way. She filed a defamation suit against the newspaper and hinted at a countersuit against whistleblowers. The company's PR team began spinning a tale of inconclusive evidence to protect shareholders. Meanwhile, anonymous trolls dredged up parts of my past to discredit me. My personal life erupted. Late-night calls, a threatening voicemail that referenced my mother. I felt my world narrow to a small circle of allies and threats. Still, the evidence kept breathing down her neck. The law was clumsy but relentless, and it moves in public view now. The parent company froze the manager's accounts and placed her on immediate leave. Her emails were sealed for forensic inspection. The office felt different, like a house where someone had shut off the main circuit. People whispered about what would happen next. The investigator called me in for a formal statement under oath. I had to be precise. Any inconsistency could be used against me. I rehearsed my testimony with the journalist's legal team and Amir. They coached me to stick to facts, avoid speculation, and clarify how I came into possession of documents. On the day, the investigator's face was unreadable. I told the truth, line by line, then handed over the backups I'd kept at the locker in the bank. He examined them, eyes flicking, and then asked a question that stopped me cold. "Why did you create that dummy invoice?" I explained the intent: to trace the manager's pattern and to force a reveal if evidence was being scrubbed. The investigator's look shifted. He wasn't merely investigating. He was evaluating my methods. He didn't arrest me, but the moment felt like standing on a cliff. After my statement, the manager's lawyers served me with a preservation demand and an order not to contact certain witnesses. Legal pressure tightened like a noose. I felt anger and shame, but also a strange clarity. I had played a dangerous game and had to live with the consequences. Then late that night, My friend Raoul texted. There's footage. She planted someone in IT. She knew about your copies. The revelation made my stomach drop. The plot had deeper roots than we guessed. I called Amir immediately. He confirmed Raoul's tip. A contractor in IT, recently hired, had admin credentials and had been seen near my workstation the night I made the copies. His log showed a brief access pattern. That meant two terrible things. Someone had surveillance and someone might be planting evidence to frame me. We dug deeper and found that the contractor's email traced to a recruitment firm that listed the manager's sister as a client. Connections tangled like vines. I felt the floor shift under me. If the manager had installed a mole, she could craft a narrative that I'd fabricated everything. I feared that our fake invoice tactic might be used against me. The journalist's editor suggested a bold move. Release a detailed chronology of events and the method of our investigation, transparent about the dummy invoice and why we'd made it. Transparency could undercut claims of fabrication and show intent. We agreed to a measured disclosure. The article ran with full methodology, showing timestamps, metadata, and chain of custody. The response polarized readers, but strengthened the legal footing of the story. The investor community panicked, stock prices twitched, and the parent company expanded the investigation to include external auditors. Still, the manager's team prepared to sue me personally. Then, a surprising twist, the backup locker we used was broken into, and the drive inside had been cloned. Whoever had access tried to frame me by adding a fake email chain suggesting I'd been paid to sabotage. It was clever and cruel. I had to prove the clone wasn't mine. Amir analyzed it and discovered metadata mismatches, timestamps altered, signatures forged. That gave us a new lead. Digital forensics could show the frame. But someone powerful was willing to escalate. The stakes rose. Facing legal threats and the possibility of being framed, I decided to go public with my story personally. I wrote an op-ed detailing my experience, carefully calibrated with the journalist's legal team. It included my motives, the manager's instruction to document everything, and the moment I found the hidden transfers. I published under my own name with legal counsel in place. The world reacted. Support poured in from whistleblower groups, and donations helped with legal fees. But the manager's lawyers retaliated with a cease and desist and threats of countersuits. The company's board called for a special meeting. The manager sat under scrutiny, and her demeanor cracked in public testimony when asked about transfers and expense approvals. She invoked memory lapses and blamed a long-tenured accountant who had since resigned. The cracks widened. Meanwhile, forensics finalized reports showing that clone drives and altered metadata had been traced to the contractor connected to her sister. The contractor admitted to forging logs under pressure, under an implied threat to his family. He named her as the orchestrator. The investigator now had a direct link. Her lawyers tried to discredit the contractor, but his testimony matched multiple independent audits. The board put her on suspension pending criminal inquiry. My relief was tempered by the realization that exposing the truth had cost me privacy, peace, and friends. But relief swelled when the investigator called, voice steady. We have enough probable cause. The net had finally tightened around her. Yet I still felt wary. She had influence and money. The move from uncovering to conviction is long and crooked. The police arrived at the office to execute a search warrant. They took servers and paper files, photographed desks, and created an inventory of seized evidence. The manager came in handcuffed by corporate security rather than police, denying everything in a tremulous voice to reporters. Cameras flashed like staccato gunfire. The parent company announced they were cooperating fully. The office hummed with shock and a strange relief, like a weight lifted but with a low aftershock. Coworkers who had feared her now whispered apologies. The investigator asked me to identify several documents. I pointed them out. The storm of headlines called for accountability. She was placed on administrative leave and then formally arrested as charges were filed. The legal process began its slow churn. I expected triumph, but the emotional fallout was messy. Her family publicly accused me of destroying a career. Anonymous threats escalated. Yet there were moments of validation. Vendors who had suffered returned with gratitude, and my mother cried when the news named accountability. Meanwhile, the journalist's long-form piece continued to attract attention, prompting other companies to audit their processes. The ripple became a wave. Still, fear lingered. I had exposed a person who pushed back with power. I took stock of my life, bruised, taxed, but morally intact. The legal system had started to respond, but the end was not yet written. Court hearings began. The manager's team argued lack of intent and claimed accounting errors. The prosecution presented paper trails, forged invoices, and testimony from vendors and the contractor. I was subpoenaed to testify. I prepared meticulously, rehearsing the exact words she had spoken and the times I found the files. In the courtroom, under oath, I recounted the moment she told me to document everything and how that instruction became the key to unraveling her scheme. Her lawyers tried to paint me as a manipulative whistleblower who framed her with a fake invoice. I remained steady, presenting the chain of custody and forensic analyses that proved the cloning and forgery were retroactive. The judge listened, sometimes stern, sometimes skeptical. The manager's face in the stand was not the same as in the office. The armor had fallen away. She pleaded not guilty. The trial stretched on, with witness after witness corroborating the pattern. The defense sought to sow doubt, but by then, independent auditors had confirmed discrepancies. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered both for and against, shouting slogans and holding signs. The case became bigger than us, a cautionary tale about corporate governance. I felt exposed but certain. The truth had its ugly costs, but it also had power. The trial wound toward judgment, but the path was long, and every day held a new twist. As the trial neared its close, more surprising revelations surfaced. The manager's role in concealing payments had been part of a larger scheme spanning multiple departments and involving a few high-level executives. Some testified that they were coerced into silence through threats of layoffs and fabricated performance issues. Others revealed how budgets were manipulated to funnel funds. The scope shocked even seasoned auditors. Meanwhile, my life felt both public and fragile. Interviews, profiles, and calls from strangers who called me brave, and others who said liar. My mother watched TV, hands wringing. My friend stood beside me. The courtroom drama was intense. Film crews camped outside like birds. Then came an unexpected twist. During cross-examination, the defense tried to introduce a private email chain suggesting I had personal grievances about promotions, implying motive. My stomach dropped. But Amir and the journalist had foreseen this. They had gathered character witnesses and documented my career track record, demonstrating consistent professionalism. The judge admonished the defense for speculative attacks. The prosecution hammered on the incontrovertible evidence. As testimonies wrapped, the tension built to a sudden cliff. The jury retired to deliberate. My hands felt like small stones in my pockets. The city felt silent. Outside court, the manager's supporters rallied, and her lawyers hinted at appeals. The verdict could still be stung by legal twists. I waited with a hollow in my chest. The jury returned. Their faces are unreadable, then calm. The foreperson stood and read the verdict, guilty on multiple counts. A shockwave went through the room. The manager's shoulders sagged, and her mouth opened in a silent sound. Later, tears came, not of contrition but fury. The courtroom erupted in a strange chorus, relief, vindication, and a raw emptiness. The judge scheduled sentencing and thanked all who'd cooperated with the investigation. The victory felt both immense and complicated. I expected to feel triumphant, but instead I felt hollow, like a space cleared for something I wasn't sure how to fill. People praised me for courage, yet the price had been high. Sleepless nights, threats, and a life now publicly tied to scandal. The company announced reforms, audits, and a new zero-tolerance policy. Vendors who suffered got partial restitution. The journalist's piece won awards, and the paper's legal team published a follow-up. But the manager appealed. Her lawyers argued procedural errors, and the case looped back into bureaucracy. I felt a new anxiety. Justice had been declared, but appeals could drag on, reopening wounds. Yet even with uncertainty, people changed. Internal checks tightened, and the culture shifted. I kept my job, strangely, and people treated me with a mix of gratitude and awkwardness. The world had moved, but the private costs remained. Still, when I visited the small cafe where I had first handed the drive to Amir, I felt a quiet sense of completion. We had done what we could, but endings in these stories are porous. The next step was sentencing, and whether the manager would truly face consequences. On sentencing day, the courtroom was packed. The judge listened as victims, and vendors read statements about hardship and betrayal. My voice shook as I read mine, the emotional toll, the fear, the relief. The manager's sister sat in the gallery, face red. When the judge announced the sentence, prison time, restitution, and a professional ban, a hush fell. She was led away with a face that had no easy expression left. Cameras flashed, and outside, people gathered to shout and argue. The company continued to rebuild. A new management team restructured processes and promised transparency. Life slowly, precariously, returned to a semblance of normal. Yet the aftershocks persisted. I received both thank you notes and hateful messages. Some friends drifted away, uncomfortable with the spotlight. Others grew closer. My mother cried less and smiled more. I took time off, walking in parks, trying to recover. I donated some of the reward funds from whistleblower grants to vendors who had been hurt. Giving felt like an act of repair. The journalists stayed in touch, their piece updated with sentencing details. The appeals made headlines for a while, but eventually the legal system's grind settled into a slow resolution. In private, I still replayed the manager's voice telling me to document everything, which had been the catalyst and the weapon that unraveled her. That paradox sat with me like a stone, how advice, used against you, could become your salvation when wielded carefully. Months later, the office felt different. New policies, more checks, and a culture that no longer tolerated shortcuts. I returned to work with scars and clearer boundaries. The manager's name faded from daily conversation, though never from official records. People asked how I felt. I said truthfully, lighter but cautious. The journalist's piece remained a case study in responsible reporting, and Amir's quiet skill helped set new cybersecurity protocols company-wide. My life resumed its small pleasures. Coffee with friends, visits with my mother, and a steady paycheck that no longer required me to bite my tongue. Sometimes at my desk, I thumbed through the old notebook and found the note where she had said, "Document everything." It felt like a talisman and a warning. I had followed instructions, yes, but I had also chosen to act, to risk, and to gather others to help. Justice had come imperfectly, through law, media, and the courage of vendors who spoke up. The final twist was personal. The manager attempted one last smear through an appeals lawyer, but their claims collapsed under the weight of forensic clarity and public scrutiny. The court upheld the sentence. In the quiet that followed, I rebuilt trust slowly, grateful that truth had a chance to breathe. My life was not the same, but it was mine. I had documented everything, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my own story. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and tap the bell to get notified the moment we drop a new story, and don't forget to like the video to help others find it.